funny because the newspaper and the news kept saying it was a remote marsh fire, and it was neither remote nor marsh. Because this land was already drained. It was drained a long time ago, and this is the main drainage canal. So it wasn't a marsh anymore. A lot of trees had grown up on it, but it was never developed for whatever reason. They haven't developed it, and so the peat, but the soil is like peat, so it started to smolder. So anyway. So recently, suddenly all these changes started happening, and I would drive back and forth a lot along the highway, and I could see that people were clearing, and then they were planting all these little trees out there, and there's something like 48,000 or 480,000, I'm not even sure. Anyway, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of little trees that have been planted out there, but they cleared all the undergrowth first. And it's a mitigation project. It's a habitat restoration project to mitigate for taking material for levee building from this part of the property. So eventually it's going to become part of the refuge. I'm not sure when, but now it belongs to the Corps of Engineers. So the Corps has taken the property out of the Cummings holding, or whatever you call it, and so it's federal property now, and it's in this mitigation project phase, and at some point in the planning, it's going to become part of it's going to be added onto the refuge.
So the borders are the canal and the chef?
I think so. I'm kind of guessing a little bit there, but that's what it looks like.
Okay.
And then I talked to a man who, my only sources of information so far have been the contractor that we talked to, and then a man, one of the rangers with the Fish and Wildlife Service, who came and worked with us on a project this weekend out here, and he was explaining it to us.
Great.
So, questions? Does that give you a bit of a picture? I'll send you those.
Can you tell us about the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. What's the other name for that?
So you guys
Mr.
remember
Go.
this is where we worked last semester.
What
Okay,
a
so you
history.
probably
Lower nine.
okay, so you probably heard quite a bit about Mr. Go while you were doing that. So this is Mr. Go, and it's something like 76 miles long from up here down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it was built as a straight shot for shipping in and out of the inner harbor of New Orleans, mostly for container ships, and so it was blamed for, well, first, over the years, the degradation of the swamps and freshwater habitats in St. Bernard Parish, and the loss of wetlands in St. Bernard Parish, and then and also it was built at, I've forgotten the width, but it in places it increased in width by threefold. It's not the same width all the way along, but like this area here is 3 times wider than it was when it originally was built. So it was eating away at the land and also altering the habitat. All this used to be beautiful cypress swamp, and it's now barely a cypress tree in sight. And because salt water, crept up here, and every time there was a storm, salt water got pushed up, very dramatically and violently, and especially Katrina. It was, all this was opened up, ready for an event like Katrina. And so now there's a surge barrier that's been built across this section, which, people have dubbed the Golden Triangle, or different names. I think this might sometimes be called, I don't know, got lots of Golden Triangle. But it's kind of like a funnel. So it funneled the storm surge into the intercoastal waterway and then into the inner harbor, and put all the pressure onto the flood walls that caused the collapse of the flood walls. And so it was just like the perfect scenario set up.
Oh my God.
So the logical thing, so they've closed the channel now to shipping. People had been asking for that for many, many, many years before Katrina, to no avail, because the shipping industry was very powerful, and so they could never make headway against the shipping industry. So even though they all yelled that they were going to be ruined and it was going to be a disaster, you know, finally Katrina, that was the final straw. So now the big surge barriers across here, and if Mr. Go's closed off here, there's a gate for ships to go through on the intercoastal, and there's also a barrier built further down. There was a ridge, another natural ridge from an old course of the Mississippi River, an old distributary channel called Bayou Sauvage, which means otter bayou. So they put another barrier there to stop the salt water from pushing up. And of course there were people who didn't like the idea because they were used to being able to navigate these ways, but they had to adjust. So that's Mr. Go in a nutshell.
Can you tell them a little bit about post-Katrina and the Bayou Sauvage area, like the changes?
Yes. Actually,
I know we'll see them as we walk.
I've got some show and tell pictures for that. I did this thing this weekend, and actually I could just, those are the marsh across the road, and then that's about hogs. So it's really pretty right now because it's springtime, so you can kind of picture. It used to be a forest, you know, with a canopy of trees. So as you walk down the trail, the trees would be overhanging the trail, and you'd be in the shade, and you would not be able to see. Well, right here, the shrubs are kind of grown up now, but you know, you definitely have a sense of being in a forest. And as we walk down the trail, you can decide what you think about, you know, what it feels like. So, so Katrina came and killed just about all the mature trees except for the ones you can see, and nearly all of them are live oak trees, the ones that survived. There are a few others, like there's some, brain's dying. Well, hackberry are one species, and then, oh gosh, it'll come to me. Sorry.
It's okay.
Getting old. Okay, so I'll try and put things in order here. After Katrina, things started to grow back up. Nature is very, very resilient, amazingly so. But right after Katrina, in the fall of 2005, this is what this area looked like. This boardwalk, and I probably shouldn't even have been. You know, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service probably didn't allow people back there. The boardwalk was all destroyed, and they rebuilt that really quick. Then the vegetation started to grow back up, so ecological succession started to take place. And then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decided that they wanted to do a management project that involved mulching all the dead fall from Katrina. So all the dead, fallen trees and dead trees and dead shrubs and things, actually all the living shrubs too, got mulched with this giant machine that just plowed its way back and forth and created this kind of desert landscape, except for the mature trees that were sticking up.
For what reason?
Well, their logical explanation is that they wanted to start ecological succession over again and get a jump start on it. So they also planted some trees afterwards. I've forgotten the number. I think it's like 7,500 trees or something like that in this area.
Because it would take longer for it to decompose and do its normal succession.
Yeah, I haven't really gotten a very detailed explanation. That's the gist of it. So I'm trying not to be show that I thought it was crazy, but anyway. A year after they did that, it looked like this. So nature, is resilient. So it started to, the herbaceous vegetation started to grow up, and then I think I have another picture of maybe a year later, the shrubs took over. So now, that was 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. 4 years later, we can kind of see how things are. A lot of shrubs and the trees, there's certain species of trees that have shot up, Chinese tallow being one of them. So one of the things they wanted to do was to not allow the Chinese tallow to take over. That was one of their big goals, because if you have a big disturbance, invasive species like Chinese tallow will come in and just take over the world if they can. So they wanted to control that kind of thing and have the species that they wanted, the native species, to grow and give them a head start, I guess. And then as far as the other side of the road, which we'll see later, this is a shot right after Katrina. And so there's a little boardwalk on the other side, and all the marsh grass was piled up, taller than me, on the boardwalk. And then afterwards, this is a shot of the marsh. It's very broken up marsh. So it's, this is forested and that is not forested. So, but then a few years later, the marsh collapsed and now it's in really bad shape. And that was partly to do with a drought that we had in 2011. So a lot of changes, constantly changing out here as far as the biology is concerned. And okay, this is a shot of the boardwalk that we're going to walk along. And before the mulching, that was the vegetation taking over. Then after the mulching, that's what it looked like. So, and then nature took back over. So.
Is the Chinese tallow like a problem in like other areas within the refuge, or like was it just something they're doing preemptively? Because like I know in the area that we walked,
it is
it is a problem.
Yeah,
the area we walked, like it seems to just be like one type of tree, like back by the levee, just like forever. Back like by the Maxent, like once it leaves the community and crosses through the levee on the other side, like. All the forested areas, I guess, which would be on the Cummings property, it just looked like it was just one tree.
Did you identify the tree?
I took some pictures of it, I think. I can show you. But I just wanted to know that was the condition.
And so